Behind the image of an idyllic, well-functioning family, there are always stressors that lie beneath the surface. Being the parent to one young child is stressful enough, but when you end up with 4 children, 3 of which who have very high needs, it can be absolutely overwhelming. That is how Tania Clarence felt in her life. But what makes this case so unbelievable is that Tania turned down countless offers for help. She put on a smile and told everyone around her, "I've got this." But she didn't have it. In fact, she started pushing people away for the sole purpose of carrying out the unthinkable against the very children she claimed to love so very much. Tania and Gary Clarence are originally from South Africa. The pair met as university students, starting a loving relationship with one another before marrying 3 years later. After the pair tied the knot, they moved to London, England. At the time, Tania started working in graphic design while Gary worked as an investment banker. By 2005, after months of trying, Tania finally became pregnant with her first daughter, Taya, who was born on April 21st, 2006. After having Taya, Tania quit her job to be home full-time. Gary continued working, but his job kept him at the office for long hours and often required him to travel for stretches of time, often internationally. This meant that while they enjoyed an upper-class lifestyle in their nice homes, Tania was left alone to care for her baby for long stretches of time. Through this, though, Tania was known to be a loving, doting mother to Taya. After having Taya, Tania and Gary knew that they wanted to continue growing their family. For the following 2 years, they continued trying to get pregnant, but this wasn't an easy feat. Tania tragically suffered from multiple miscarriages before she finally became pregnant again in 2008. Their second daughter, Olivia, was born by June 15, 2009. Then, 6 months later, Tania found herself pregnant once again, this time with twin boys who made their dramatic entrance into the world while Tania and Gary were on vacation. By June 19, 2010, the couple were in Portugal when she gave birth to her twin boys prematurely at just 26 weeks gestation. For those who don't know, 26 weeks is incredibly early. Some babies may not even survive being that premature. But thanks to advances in healthcare technology, many preemie babies can still live and grow outside the womb, eventually growing into happy, healthy children without many complications. Due to how early they were, though, the twins, Ben and Max, remained in intensive care in Portugal for 3 months until October of that year. Once stable enough to travel, they were then transported back to the UK, where they remained in the hospital for an additional month. While that was all happening, Olivia and Taya stayed with Gary's parents in South Africa. It was while they were there where baby Olivia was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. SMA is a genetic neuromuscular disorder that causes the muscles within the body to become very weak and start wasting away or atrophying. It involves the loss of lower motor neurons or anterior horn cells, which are responsible for controlling movement. Without those neurons, the nerves can't deliver the proper signals telling the muscles to move. What a lot of people don't realize is that muscles are responsible for every source of movement and stability within your body. And I know that sounds obvious, like you're moving your arm or your leg or, your body in general, but that includes breathing, eating, and just sitting still. With SMA, the spine doesn't have the musculature to keep it in proper position, so sometimes it starts to curve as it's pulled down by gravity, often leading to scoliosis. Chewing and swallowing becomes very difficult because those muscles are very weak. Beyond that, I also feel like some people think that your rib cage moves just because of your lungs, which is true, but there are a lot of different muscles involved with breathing as well, including your intercostal muscles, scalenes, and your diaphragm. So the biggest concern with SMA is that once these respiratory muscles start to atrophy, the respiratory system can no longer function normally. SMA is classified into 5 different subtypes, numbered 0 through 4, becoming less severe as you go up. Type 0 affects a fetus before birth, leading to limited movement of the fetus within utero. These babies will often go into respiratory failure within the first month of life. Type 1 accounts for more than half of SMA cases in which symptoms occur within the first 6 months of life. These children will often die before the age of 2. Type 2 occurs between 6 and 18 months, and these symptoms include progressive muscle wasting, which tends to affect their legs more than their arms. Many children with SMA2 will be able to sit up and move, but may not be able to walk. Most children with SMA2 will survive into adulthood until around age 25 to 30. SMA type 3 will show up around the same time as type 2, but these symptoms are less severe. They will experience leg weakness and difficulty walking, but they typically don't develop breathing issues, so their life expectancy is pretty normal. And lastly, type 4 is the mildest form of SMA, not appearing until after the age of 21. Muscle weakness symptoms progress very slowly, so most people with type 4 will have a relatively normal lifestyle and age expectancy is not affected. So Olivia, she was diagnosed with SMA type 2, meaning that her legs will be the most affected. She may never be able to walk and is not expected to live past 30. This was already devastating news to hear about their precious new baby, but then they were hit with yet another devastating blow. By November of 2010, once the twin boys, Max and Ben, were finishing up their treatment at the hospital, they too were diagnosed with SMA type 2. So within about a year, Tania and Gary went through a lot. They were hoping to grow their family, hoping to raise their children into adulthood as anyone else would. But now they were hit with the devastating reality that 3 of their 4 children are going to live with a severe degenerative muscular disorder that is going to take their lives so soon after they begin. By that time, the family all returned home with all of these unexpected changes. They knew they were in for a challenge, but they were ready to face anything they had coming for them. By August of 2011, the family moved from their small, modest home into a larger, nicer home in Wadsworth. They needed a lot of medical equipment to support their children's needs, but they didn't want their home to look like a hospital. So they opted for a nicer home with more space to accommodate their needs and wants. They also had 2 nannies at the time, both of who were described as wonderful and so very helpful. Their first nanny was known to help in all aspects of care for the children. She grew very close to the family, sometimes taking care of the boys at her own home to give Tania a break. The second nanny was a healthcare assistant who received training and supervision from the healthcare agency. This meant that her fee could be paid via the government grant rather than directly from the family. Soon, their life became constant doctor visits, hospital stays, and therapy appointments where they would receive all sorts of therapies and medical treatments. Tania was taking her children to up to 5 appointments every day, 5 days a week. They were also subject to frequent hospital stays. Anytime one of those 3 children became sick, they could be in the hospital for weeks at a time. During most days, Tania couldn't really spend quality time with her children because they were always surrounded with medical professionals in their home or at appointments. The only time she really got to spend with her kids was at night when they would frequently wake up in need of more care. She went on to say that she hadn't had a full night's rest in years, and even getting 4 hours of sleep was a rare luxury in her life. Gary continued working, again, long hours, often going on trips, so most of the care was her responsibility. When she got into contact with SMA support and was visited by an outreach manager, she spoke of feeling alone and struggling. But she said that she didn't want any further home visits because the house was too crowded. Those around Tania started to feel that she was experiencing some very low lows in her mood. She was becoming overwhelmed, stretched way too thin, and was constantly exhausted. By the spring of 2012, Tania told their general practitioner that she was struggling with life and felt trapped. This sentiment continued until the end of 2012 when she told her social worker that she was overwhelmed. Of course, mental health therapy was always recommended to her through everything, but she never went ahead with it. Then, all throughout 2012, those involved in the children's care became concerned due to Tania's inconsistency with appointments and meetings. For example, she had canceled 6 follow-up visits in a row for Olivia with her general practitioner. After that, the boys weren't seen either for around 8 months. However, it was said that Tania and Gary were selecting which therapies and interventions they felt were appropriate for the children. Their focus was improving on quality of life, not extending their lives as long as possible. Meanwhile, a lot of medical professionals will continue recommending every possible intervention to correct a problem, even if that means they will have to take time to recover. Basically, if it was going to cause the children pain, Tania didn't want to get it done. If they only had a few years on this earth, she didn't want a single moment to be taken up by healing from a surgery, for example. Of course, this led to a lot of tension between Tania and Gary and their medical team. As a medical professional myself, I always try and see a parent's point of view when it comes to treatment for their children. I understand not wanting to see a child in pain. This is actually something that I deal with a lot in my day job because I work primarily with children who do have disabilities. I am all for waiting it out to see if something improves or weighing the pros and cons of how much a certain procedure will improve quality of life. But I can say that I've definitely butt heads with some parents who refuse to get something done that I believe is needed. So I can see how this would happen in Tania's situation, and I can see how this would cause a lot of tension between her and her medical team. Around that time, by October of 2012, the family made another move into a home in Kingston. During their transition, the family worked with all the medical professionals involved in the children's care to transfer clinicians, appointments, and make sure they kept up with all of their medical interventions. They also started setting up all sorts of adaptations in the home. They built a wheelchair-accessible ramp, a chairlift to the stairs, and an accessible door. Once they were moved in, care responsibility for the children's social care transferred to Kingston, which meant changes in basically the entire care team, including the general practitioner, lead professional, and community pediatric team. The following month, they had a multidisciplinary meeting to get the ball rolling with their new care team. When the children were examined by the new clinicians, they noted that all of them appeared to be a bit underweight. They noted that Gary and Tania were still grieving, and Tania especially appeared depressed, but was still refusing her own treatment. They noted that they needed to keep an eye on the children's weight, as well as on the mom's attitude towards caring for her children. A few weeks later, Olivia and one of the twin boys, I'm not sure exactly which one, it's not clear in the reports, but they were both admitted to the hospital for bronchitis and a chest infection, respectively. At that time, it was noted that Olivia was severely underweight, being within the 0.4th percentile for children her age. Due to this, she was given a nasogastric tube for feeding, which allowed her to gain some weight while in the hospital. Due to how underweight she was, the doctors were recommending a gastronomy to be done for Olivia. This is a procedure where a hole is made in the stomach so that she could be fed via a tube. This would ensure that she was getting the proper nutrition since she clearly was not eating enough. This was not something that Tania agreed to, though. She believed it was unnecessary and felt that the doctors were just treating Olivia like a guinea pig, trying to just do more and more surgeries, while her healthcare team noted that they felt that Tania and Gary were unable to appreciate the long-term benefits that a gastronomy would have. For the weeks that followed, Tania continued to reject the various therapy options being offered. She declined therapeutic play to enrich them and provide mental stimulation. She rejected the use of HKAFOs, or hip, knee, ankle, foot orthotics, which are braces that you can wear on the lower legs to help someone with weak lower extremities stand or walk. Once again, she was butting heads with her care team, feeling that they were judging her and pushing for all these treatments that were just prolonging suffering rather than improving her current quality of life. Also during that time, a risk assessment was done to determine how Tania was doing. During one of her visits to the GP, she acknowledged the stress that she was under, especially involving all of these medical appointments and constant therapies for the kids, people coming in and out of the house, all of that. But she assured them that she was happy. She was feeling stronger than ever. She didn't want medication, she didn't want therapy, and she didn't want to join a support group. None of this would be of any help to her, and she was feeling just fine. By February of 2013, after meeting with the family multiple times and Tania continuing to decline care, an interdisciplinary meeting was held to discuss concerns of neglect. They put together a letter and an information packet to provide further information regarding the care they needed and any support they could offer. A few weeks later, a team member went into the home where they discussed the concerns with Tania and gave her this information booklet. After the meeting, they noted that Tania was now accepting help from a dietitian and a language therapist and was now providing better nutritional support for the children. For the weeks that followed, things seemed to be going okay within the home, but that changed in May and June of 2013. At this time, Olivia had been in the hospital a few times for breathing concerns. During these visits, Tania was known to become agitated, often yelling at the nurses and crying, not allowing them to come near Olivia. During one of the visits, her oxygen alarm went off, indicating that Olivia's oxygen was low. Tania turned it off, though, because she didn't want the nurses to bother them again. At this time, Tania switched Olivia's breathing mask to a nasal cannula, which is the more comfortable option, but it isn't capable of delivering as much oxygen as a facial mask. When the doctor came into their room the following morning, he noticed the switch and became upset. He felt that it was inappropriate for Tania to switch the oxygen delivery without permission. Due to this, the hospital staff noted their concerns about medical abuse. By mid-2014, all 4 children were attending public school. By this point, Olivia was 4 and Ben and Max were 3. According to school staff, Olivia was described as a shy child when you first met her, but when you asked her about school or her favorite color, she would just light up and talk nonstop. She loved pink and fairies. She had a good sense of humor and had a strong will about her. She enjoyed school and being with friends, always ready to play and learn. She was bright, bubbly, and inquisitive, and always seemed so very happy. Her quality of life was good, and she loved her family. Ben and Max had just started school as well, but they made their impressions on staff quickly. They were happy and chatty boys. They said what they wanted and weren't afraid to make themselves known. They were always particularly interested in playing with trains and cars. As they spent more time at school, those around them started noticing their differences in personalities. Each of these little boys was his own person, with his own thoughts, feelings, and attitudes. They all seemed to be doing okay when they first started school, and Tania and Gary continued to seem like supportive, concerned parents who just wanted what was best for their children. Their care team even noted a shift in Tania's behavior. She seemed happier and calmer. She was happy that the kids were doing so well in school and were enjoying themselves. Up to this point, I've talked a lot about the care the children were receiving and how this was changing and evolving throughout their lives. To summarize, it seemed that since Olivia was the oldest and was farthest along in her diagnosis, she needed the most support, but Max and Ben were close behind. Each of them were requiring more and more, from spinal braces to correct their scoliosis, breathing treatments anytime they got sick, even with something as mild as a cold. They needed feeding and nutrition support because of difficulty with chewing and swallowing. The less they could move, the more support they needed. All the while, Tania was struggling. She was the one responsible for their care, while Gary worked long hours and often had to travel for days, if not weeks at a time. She felt overwhelmed by all of the appointments. She was bothered by the constant people coming in and out of her home for all these different therapies, feeling that her privacy was being invaded. She and Gary both felt hopeless at times, especially as healthcare providers were presenting them with all of these different interventions to consider. If they didn't accept certain interventions, they felt judged and scrutinized. They had their 2 nannies, physiotherapists, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, neurologists, health visitors, nurses, general practitioners, social workers, and consultants. In total, they had about 60 professionals involved in the family, all of whom tried their best to support the family, but who often made Tania feel very overwhelmed and judged. I also want to note that several months after moving to Kingston in February of 2014, their main social worker was switched. The social worker they had been working with for all those months was highly experienced and specialized in families with children under 5 years old. Tania trusted her more than anyone else, and she truly believed that she had her best interest at heart. But she had been switched out because social services believed that this woman was too close to the family to stay objective. The social worker was then replaced with basically a new hire, a woman who had only been working in the field for about 6 months at that point. She wasn't quite yet equipped to handle the complicated nature of Tania's family situation. Their interactions were relatively pleasant at first, but Tania felt that she probed too much. She asked too many inappropriate questions and appeared patronizing. There was one time in which the social worker asked her one very deeply emotional question. This caused Tania to become overwhelmed and upset. And instead of waiting until their next interaction to bring up the next topic, she followed up with another very emotional, upsetting question. Basically, it seemed that she was still just following the rule book, going by what she learned in a classroom, trying to check off some boxes that she knew that they needed to talk about, rather than reading the situation at hand and basing her actions off of that. That's something that you really can only get through experience in the field. Through all of this, their various healthcare teams noticed that Tania's mental health struggles were worsening, and they were concerned that she continuously was denying care for her children and even for herself. But at the end of the day, through all of this, through everything I've told you up to this point, nobody could have expected what was to come. By April 8th, 2014, Gary went away to the United States for a golfing trip, returning back April 18th. The same day, he grabbed their oldest daughter, Taya, and off they went to South Africa for another short trip. In the meantime, one of the nannies, Jade, took the twins to her home on the 18th to care for them until Monday, the 21st of April. During that time, Tania's mother and her partner visited with Tania and Olivia at the home. By later in the evening that Monday, Jade returned the twins back to the home and into the care of Tania. Shortly after, Tania's mother also left the home. However, by the early morning hours going into April 22nd, Jade received a call from Tania's mother who said that she hadn't heard from her since she left her home. In response, Jade and a friend headed back over to the home to check on them. They entered the home and found that it was dark and quiet. On the banister at the bottom of the stairs, Jade had found a folded-up note which had been addressed to Gary. She opened it, and it read, "Gary, don't let Taya go into the kids' rooms or our bedroom." After reading the note, they used the light on their phones to guide them as they made their way up into Tania's bedroom, where they opened the door and found Tania, who appeared to be in the middle of a panic episode. She was holding a towel and turned to them, asking them to leave over and over and over again, but the entire time she was saying it in a whisper. They asked her what they can do to help her, and all she said was that it was too late to help. One of them asked if she had taken anything, and she said that she did yesterday, but it didn't work. At that time, it was obvious to the group that Tania had attempted to take her own life. At the time, one of the friends called 911 to report the situation. On the call, the operator told him to go check on the kids, so he made his way into the twins' room, and there they discovered both boys in their beds, not moving and not breathing. He quickly went into a state of shock, immediately coming to the realization that these little boys were dead. The operator asked him to go check on Olivia, but he was frozen. He was too stunned and terrified that he couldn't bring himself to go and check on her because deep down, he already knew what he was going to find. As that was happening, Tania handed Jade a letter, which read, "I'm sorry I had to do this, but I couldn't carry on. I also could not leave the children with Gary. It would have been too much for him. You have been such an amazing person in our lives over the last few years. Without you, I most likely would have done this a lot sooner." When officers showed up to the scene, they found that 3-year-old Ben and Max and 4-year-old Olivia were all dead in their beds. When officers went into Tania's room, they found another note on top of a pile of clothing. It said, "Gary, I don't want to be saved. Please, I can't live with the horror of what I've done. I thought the pills would work. They didn't." When officers found Tania, she was clearly in a state of panic with an injury to her wrists. It appeared that she tried cutting her wrists to take her own life. When the officer asked her what happened, she immediately said, I'm sorry, I killed them." When they asked what she did, she said, "I suffocated them." At that time, Tania was taken to the hospital for her injuries. Once cleared, she was then taken to the police station for an interview where she basically just said, "Why do we have to do this? I'm guilty." From there, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital where she was examined by a forensic psychiatrist. For the weeks that followed, an investigation was done into this incident to figure out why it happened. They found that Tania had been planning to murder her children for days before carrying it out. Investigators believed that it was on April 18th, 4 days before the murders, in which she made up her mind to kill them. She had written a to-do list for her husband titled Things to Do and Remember. Items included that Taya's birthday was coming up, leaving a draft of an invitation for her birthday party. She also included instructions on who Gary should inform of their deaths and the next steps to take. It's thought that the murders took place on the night of April 21st going into April 22nd, sometime between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. She took a diaper and used that to smother her twin boys so that they wouldn't smell her as she stood over each of them, taking their lives. She then went to Olivia, who she found much harder to kill. She held a diaper over her face, smothering her to death as well. She then positioned each of their bodies in their beds into funeral positions before surrounding them with their favorite toys. She then attempted to take her own life by swallowing pills, which didn't work, so she tried injuring herself, which also didn't work. Now, 4 days before the letters, she wrote her husband another letter dated April 18th. This letter spoke of her intention to kill her children and explained why. It reads, "I cannot face going down this path watching Liv and the boys continue to get weaker. Most importantly, the interference in our lives, Gosh, NHS, Kingston, Moore Lane. I'm tired of it all. No matter what we have overcome, no matter what we do, it will never be enough." This letter speaks to her frustration that she was facing with the plethora of medical professionals they were dealing with. Again, she felt judged and scrutinized by them, and she couldn't take it any longer. It's now believed by investigators that dealing with all of these individuals is truly what pushed her over the edge. Then there was another note found, which was written after killing the boys but before killing Olivia. It reads, "Gary, I need to tell you how difficult it is for me to take Liv's life. I'm so ghastly and I feel every ounce of it for doing this. The boys were bad enough. I'm struggling with Liv. I waited until the boys were asleep. The same with Liv. If I could take my own life and leave her to wait for you, I would. But the wait will be as traumatic. This is so bad and I'm so sorry. This life is better without me. I am nothing. The only thing giving me motivation to continue is the belief that the boys are already up playing in heaven like they never could play here. I can see them all running around." This letter speaks to why Tania did this, of course. She just couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't continue watching the children slowly die in front of her. She couldn't handle the stress anymore of caring for them. I don't know why it seemed that Tania had such a harder time with Olivia than the boys. I don't want to speculate, but it really did break my heart to see that one of her children was harder to murder than the other. I don't understand why that was the case, but that's how she felt. Either way, after all of this went down, Tania was arrested and initially charged with 3 counts of murder. Of course, Gary had been notified of what happened, so he and Taya flew back to the UK as soon as they could to face what was to come. The first time Gary saw Tania was at her first court hearing. At that time, Tania was sobbing and she couldn't handle sitting through the entire thing. The two locked eyes while Gary silently sobbed in his seat as well. At that time, Tania was held without bail as she awaited her trial for her charges. But during this time, she was examined by the psychologist who determined that she had been suffering from severe major depression. They went into her background, which got into details that included her own grandmother taking her own life when she was a child. Growing up, she had suffered from a plethora of mental health issues, which only worsened as an adult when she found herself in a toxic relationship. Once she was with Gary, things improved tremendously, but she still found herself in depressive episodes from time to time. Things, of course, only got worse after having 3 children with severe degenerative diseases. She felt alone, stressed, overwhelmed, judged, criticized, and hopeless. As I outlined throughout this entire video, things reached a breaking point and she couldn't handle it any longer. Some have said that she killed her children to end their suffering, while some believe it was to end her own. I think it was a combination of both. She was suffering at the stress of it all and of watching her children suffer. This caused her to reach that breaking point and taking their own lives before wanting to take her own. Due to this, after months of psychiatric evaluation, the prosecution and Tania came to an agreement to drop her murder charges and instead charged her with manslaughter due to diminished responsibility due to her mental status. The prosecution in this case called it one of the saddest they've ever seen, going through all the details that I brought you up to this point. Family and friends, as well as her husband Gary, all spoke at her sentencing hearing to discuss how doting and loving of a mother Tania was. Through all of this, Gary continued to support her, saying, "My wife Tania dedicated her life to loving and caring for our children, and she always put their well-being before her own. The overwhelming responsibilities of this care took its toll on Tania and led to feelings of despair and hopelessness, culminating in severe depression at the time of the incident."
This is a statement on behalf of the Clarence family. This case is one of the saddest to come before the criminal courts. The Clarence family, and in particular Tania Clarence, dedicated their lives to the care and welfare of their 3 severely disabled children. Her love and commitment and tenacity in the face of the overwhelming responsibilities such care entailed was extraordinary. Her daily struggle eventually overwhelmed Tania's ability to cope with the enormity of the task she faced. Ultimately, her story of dedication and love became a story of despair and utter hopelessness. The loss of the children's lives at the hands of the mother who cherished them is a tragedy explained by the severe depressive illness. But it is also a tragedy from which lessons need to be learned. Tania's depression was certainly not assisted by the constant pressure placed on the family by some individuals within the medical profession and social services who could not agree with Tania and Gary Clarence's stance of prioritising quality of life of their children, and who were not readily willing to submit the children to operations and other interventions that they felt were not appropriate in the circumstances.
I do understand everything she went through, and I can see how she was left feeling hopeless, exhausted, drained, and overwhelmed. I can see why she felt like she had no privacy. I can see why she was depressed. However, the argument of diminished capacity means that she didn't know right from wrong. She didn't realize what she was doing. To me, she knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew it was wrong. She warned her husband and nanny. She apologized for her actions. Yes, she was in a very vulnerable and emotional mental state, but that doesn't mean she didn't know what she was doing. Either way, due to this, she was given a sentence to a psychiatric hospital, the Old Bailey, where she would remain until professionals believed that she received adequate mental health support, which according to staff came only 4 months after receiving this sentence. By March of 2015, she was seen at her home in New Malden with her only surviving child. The last I was able to find, she returned to living in the very home where she suffocated 3 of her 4 children to death.
Here at the Criminal Court in London, Mr. Justice Sweeney ruled that Tania Clarence should be sectioned under the Mental Health Act at a secure mental health facility, and that she should not be handed a prison sentence for the killing of her 3 young children. He said that despite the fact that she had abused her position of trust by killing them, and the fact that she had deprived her eldest daughter Taya of growing up without her siblings, she would have not killed her 3 children had she not been suffering from mental health problems, including a severe depressive episode. The mother killed her 3 young children, who were all suffering from the degenerative disease spinal muscular atrophy, which leads to the severe shortening of their lives and meant they had to be fed through a tube and were confined to wheelchairs. She killed them at the family's South London home, while her husband Gary Clarence and the couple's eldest daughter, 8-year-old Taya, who does not suffer from the disease, were on holiday in South Africa. We heard in the court how Tania Clarence was overwhelmed not only by the illness of the children, but by the many medical professionals that were involved in their treatment, and which at times Gary Clarence and herself had major differences about regarding how the children should be treated, with the couple always preferring a quality of life rather than medical interventions that would lead to further suffering of the children.
And as abruptly as it seems, this is where the case sits today. And I do have a lot of mixed feelings about this case, as I'm for sure a lot of you do too. First, I want to say that caring for a child with a disability, let alone 3, is incredibly difficult. And that's coming from someone who cares for children with disabilities at my job, but comes home to a quiet home with my dogs. The parents I work with are caring for those very high needs children 24/7. I do understand the stress. I understand the lack of privacy. As, again, a healthcare provider myself, there's some families that I know everything about them. I understand and I can sympathize with everything that Tania has described feeling throughout this case. But at the same time, I do think that this case leads to a dangerous precedent that is just not acceptable. People with disabilities are not just an inconvenience who need to be gotten rid of because they're suffering, or because someone else doesn't understand them or what they're going through, or because they're just too much to care for. Those children had a lot of issues, but it's not up to anybody else to decide whether they live or die. And that's what it comes down to. Because yes, they had severe disabilities. Yes, they were going to die prematurely. But what it comes down to, at least in my head, is that nobody else gets to make that decision for somebody else. I don't get to decide if anyone else lives or dies. I don't have that power, and nobody else should. These kids were happy children who just wanted to play and go to school and be around their peers. I feel like these children have been forgotten about in this case because all anyone wants to talk about is how Tania was feeling and why she did this, including at her own hearings. And at the hearings that were supposed to be about the kids, they were talking about Tania and why she did this and how she was feeling. I don't understand why she refused to get mental health help for herself. I don't understand why she didn't at least give these support groups a try. There is respite care. There are homes for children with special needs if she truly couldn't care for them. There are parents out there ready and willing to adopt special needs children, no matter how severe. I know that because a lot of the children I work with are with adoptive parents who took them in because of their disability, because their birth parents could not or would not care for them. There are so many options, and there were so many options. And I just feel like this was not considered enough when everyone was all, oh, poor Tania, she had so much to go through, which again, she did. She was going through it. but she had a lot of other options. And I feel like when they were sentencing her, when they were considering the case at hand, they didn't think enough about what her other options were and why she continuously denied them. Again, I can agree with everything she felt, while still believing that what she did was wrong and still feeling that she deserved much more time than she got. She took away 3 lives and only spent a few months in jail, then a few months at a mental health hospital. That is unacceptable. There is one more thing that I want to bring up, and it might feel like a sensitive issue. I may get maybe heat for it, but it's something that I think is important to talk about, and it's something that I want you all to know, and that is that there are options out there. First, if you and your partner are considering getting pregnant, get genetic testing done to find out if you and or your partner are carriers for any type of genetic condition. If you are, based on what those genes are and how they present and are carried, you can have a good idea of what to expect going into your pregnancy. And once you are pregnant, they can do testing to see if the child is going to have that specific condition. If you are at risk for having a child with a genetic condition, you can also get that child tested during pregnancy to see if the fetus will have any of those conditions. The choices you make based on that testing is your own. I won't get into that. But if you find out that you are going to have a child with any sort of condition, at least you will have more time to prepare and understand the complications of said condition. And it gives you time to consider any treatments for that child. Medical technology is vastly, very, very quickly improving. And there are so many things that are coming out, new medications, new treatments for certain conditions. SMA, there are certain medications that you can take that will drastically improve quality of life for someone diagnosed with that condition. So even if you do have a child with a certain condition, if you find out during pregnancy and if you choose to keep the child, it won't be a total surprise when they're born, and you won't be left scrambling, and you'll know what to expect. You'll know what your options are, and if there is certain medications that are out there to try, you can get them started as soon as possible. Again, this case happened over 10 years ago, and since then there have been so many advances in healthcare technology and pharmacology. Ask a doctor about your options. There are always new medications, new medical procedures, new techniques that can drastically improve the quality of life for many disabilities and other conditions. I know that having children with such high needs is scary, and not everyone is equipped to handle it. I truly admire the parents I work with every single day for what they do for their kids. And if any of you out there are parents to high needs children, I admire you as well, and I appreciate what you do every single day for your child, because it is not for the faint of heart. But if you find yourself in a similar position as Tania, just know that there are options and there is help out there. You just need to find it and accept it. But that is where I will leave that. You all heard the details of this case and my thoughts about all of it, so now I want to hear from you all. What do you think of this case, and what do you think of Tania's motive? Do you think she got the appropriate sentence, or was it too light? Should she have been charged with murder and sentenced to prison? Let's discuss this and any other thoughts you have in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to go ahead and leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to turn that notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Spotify. All will be linked down below. And if you have any case suggestions, please make sure to fill out the Google form, which is also listed down below. With that, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.